You're quite welcome to switch on your video, or switch on your video. You're quite welcome to switch on your sound, or you can type in the chat room for me. Why this webinar? Is when we have an idea of what it is. Because I found often, we go to panels with the idea of, oh, this sounds interesting. And then we walk away from the panel at the end and go like, oh, but they didn't address what I was thinking. They didn't answer my questions. So I'm not wanting that to happen tonight. Yes, Linda, let's hear from you.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and Johann's
Okay.
waving at you.
Yeah, I was hoping to hear how other business leaders have dealt with the pandemic. I'm a CEO myself, and just kind of balancing the line between things must be done and delivered, and we have customers and they have expectations. But at the same time, remaining empathetic to say that I understand, for example, some employees have been infected or they're taking care of a loved one who's infected. In my case, I have very young children and they're not going to school, but that was a choice. But nonetheless, the responsibility for their education now rests with me and my husband. So that means I'm not as available to my work compared to what they've become accustomed to, because previously it was 12 hours a day or whatever around the clock. So practically, how has everybody kind of adjusted to how we're living now? That's what I'm hoping for out of this webinar. Thank you so much.
So let's start off with your question, Linda. Venessa, how have you adapted to what's happening now? You're muted, Venessa.
Sorry, I just realized I started talking and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Linda, for your question. I think it's an important question because all of us are in exactly the same storm. We are in different boats, but in the same storm. And I think even as panelists, we are also in process. So none of us are saying we have got it right, we understand exactly how it is to get through this time. We're just saying there are certain things that we've learned in the experiences that we've had. And this is just basically a time to come together and share some of those experiences and to share how what we've learned, the skills that we've learned before are assisting us now. So one of the things that I've learned, Linda, in my experience, about 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, but 3 years ago, I went through a very difficult time in my life. I was doing my master's degree and I had just started my business, and my fiance passed away 7 months into my master's degree. And so that literally threw me off course, where my life compass was pointing true north, and I knew what I was doing, I knew where I was going, business was going well, my studies were going well, and his death literally made my compass needle literally turn uncontrollably. And for me, that was an incredibly difficult time, because that was a storm that I had not anticipated. It was a storm that I didn't even think was possible. I mean, I knew it was possible, but I just didn't think that it would be possible in the midst of all the things that I was doing in my life at the time. And so one of the things that I decided to do was to make decisions. And one of the decisions that I made was that I'm going to finish my master's degree. So yes, what it meant was that it would change course. So I might not necessarily graduate as I hope to have graduate, perhaps not graduate with the, the marks that I hoped for. But one thing for sure was that I'm going to finish this degree, even if I'm dragged through the finish line. And the other thing was that I was going to continue running the business. So I wasn't going to go back running to corporate as a shelter. I was going to finish what I started and stick with the business. And so after deciding those two things, that one, I'm going to stay the course, I'm going to finish, what I had started, and that I was going to continue with the business. One of the things was that what I learned from that also was then to start with my routine. So to start with the things that I know. So because mourning is such a violent storm, grief is such a violent storm, it's unexpected. One day you're okay, next day you're hit by a wave, and then you're back on the ground, you know, and it literally just throws you all over the place. So one of the things that I stuck to was the fact that I know for a fact that my emotional state wasn't guaranteed. So whenever I had strength to do something, I did it then. So I literally stuck to the things that I know, and I anchored myself in my routine. My routine in the morning was to have my time of meditation and prayer, and every hour in the morning I stuck to that, whether I was in tears, whether I was on the floor, whether I was in a room in my kitchen, wherever I was, I decided to stick to my routine and anchor myself in that routine. And every time I had little bits of strength, I would use those strengths for the days when I was okay, that I was okay. And then for the days when I wasn't okay, I allowed myself not to be okay. So I think the most important thing, the thing that really kept me together, was sticking to the things that I know. And for you in your business, it's to decide what does Linda know about herself, and what does she know about her business. Number one, you don't know when this situation is going to end. You don't know when the lockdown will end, but you do know how to manage your team. You do know how to manage a business, and you can stick to that. Secondly, you have to decide, you know, what you want from this time. People decide to allow their marriage to fall apart during lockdown. I mean, I've had a few coaching clients who you know, will complain about the lockdown and just what it's done to their marriage, but I'm like, no, you decided to let your marriage fall apart. So you have to decide that your marriage is not going to fall apart during lockdown. And what does that mean then? What do you need to do to ensure that your marriage doesn't fall apart during lockdown? If it's your spouse who's decided that he's checked out, how do you then decide how to react to that? So I would say to you, Linda, start with the things that you know. So decide what you want. Do you want to keep your employees? If you want to keep all of your employees, what does that mean? So if you don't want to suffer any retrenchments, what do you as a leader need to do in order to make sure that no one is retrenched? So you decide on that. You decide that there will be no retrenchments, and you do whatever you need to do to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's possible. It's very, very possible. I know of companies that have rather got rid of all their leases in order to keep their staff. So if you've got a building sitting empty, you get rid of your lease, you keep your staff. So it's possible to keep your staff if that's what you decide to do. And secondly, then you decide, then you start doing the things that you know. You know how to be a mom, you know how to be a manager, you know how to be a CEO, and then stick to that. Stick to the things that you know how to do, because everything else will always be changing. And for me, being grounded and being anchored in those things is that helped me through my very difficult time. So I hope that's useful.
Yeah, certainly very useful. Thank you. I think one of the most powerful things I'll take away was when you said it's okay not to be okay. There are those days when you're not okay, and that's fine. It's part of the journey, it's part of the process. And then when you're feeling the strength, you kind of lean into that strength and let it, you know, kind of push you, motivate you, and you leverage it. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry for your loss, Venessa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Colleen,
our condolences on your loss. Okay. Let me just find which one is Jason over here. He wants to be co-host. Okay, but he's not called Jason, so we don't know. All right, so Johann, how have you managed this time of uncertainty? I've seen also that Brendan wants to know what skills we have used in what we're doing. So what Venessa has said about make decisions, don't sit on the fence. It's okay not to know, it's okay, but collectively we do know. How do we work together? What can we do? And often for leadership, it's very scary not to know, because as leaders, we've always thought that we need to know. So Johann, your uncertainties, what you've been navigating?
Yeah, so just to give some context, I run a small company, so we're 5 people, which makes it considerably easier navigating uncertainty. You need to take that into context because it's very easy to get 5 of us around a circle. And my main mode is to try and understand how do you respond versus how do you react to a situation. So, and you would have noticed all the big companies issued their response to the crisis, but they're almost carbon copies often. Countries did carbon copies of the response to the crisis and so on. So, and then you actually wonder, there's something missing there. And for me, that missing piece is what I call dialogue. That if you need to give yourself some room, and you need to orientate yourself. This is not something you can understand by yourself. And luckily you're not in it by yourself. You know, so there's certain situations where, you know, you're dealing in a crisis, identity crisis, or like we just heard on your own. This is luckily a crisis that we share. So, so that was my primary, wouldn't call it skill, but that was I valued that discussion. So of course you first get your team together, but then we did it with the clients also. So we created direct conversations with clients and regional, even though it's online, it didn't matter. We created regional conversations with our clients in PE or in Durban or wherever, and we kind of called it as a kind of skills update, but it was more like a check-in and then a loosened agenda. And then I started taking it further and further and just started running dialogues online, and we kept dropping the agenda even more, because as soon as you put an agenda on, you have an assumption of how to solve the problem, and we're just not connecting that well, you know. So again, that's what I see when people issue a response. They assume they know how to deal with this crisis, and actually a lot of us don't know. And so it takes that courage and that vulnerability to get into a dialogue and saying, actually, I don't know, but, you know, can you just share what you're seeing from your perspective? And we can create a space there where at least we're building trust and we are seeing something a little bit better than we've done before. And then it has the social perks and the, you know, feeling of belonging, and that you're not isolated and not alone. All these things are valuable adds to keep you going. Maybe I'll just stop there so I don't overrun. Thanks.
Thanks, Johann. Mapule, from your side.
So, and deep appreciation to Johann and Venessa, and I'm going to draw on their sharing as well a little bit. I think the biggest for me was this is an unprecedented time, and I think what we're seeing happen is what we thought was a culmination of a storm, you know, sort of perpetuates. And so as we're talking about navigating through uncertainty, it's almost like this uncertainty keeps growing and it's mounting, because a couple of months ago we were talking, you know, our stress was there was one person who caught COVID. And the next thing we were talking about, you know, a shrinking economy. And now we're talking about, you know, people losing lives. And now we're also talking about the possibility of an even further shrink of the economy. And so we're finding ourselves in such a rut and in such a rat race. And there's this deep, you know, there's this sensation all around and a deep need for people to feel like they've got to show up for something or someone, which mind is almost undefined, you know. So we find ourselves carrying statements that says, you know, I need to progress my organization, I need to make more money, I need to save my employees, I must, and then I must, let's keep growing. Yet in the stillness, you know, when you start to unpack why, who is it serving, what is the intended outcome, we haven't defined those things. And what starts to happen is it starts eroding on you as a person. It starts eroding on your own self, yourself, your physical, your emotional well-being. And then we almost get surprised when people are either shrinking into depression, or people are hiding and we can no longer find them anymore, because there's this urgency to respond to something that we haven't defined. My response has been, and I'm not saying this is something that happened overnight, it found me in different phases because I also went through my own dips and my highs and lows. And I found that, you know, I was still stuck in a mental model of, I'm a career woman, I need to be successful. I need to show up saying all these powerful things. I need to write blogs. I need to show up as this leader who's coordinating and helping coordinate the organization. You know, I have to be at the forefront of this change. What was starting to deplete was me as a person. Because while, you know, we use the analogy of, you know, in the aeroplane, they say, please mask yourself first before you rescue other people. And I was in the state of, you know, putting the mask on other people, and I was depleting. And it got to a space where actually the more and more I realized that actually if tomorrow I wasn't here, life will still continue. But for myself, I haven't really actually defined, why am I reacting to everything? What's sitting in my value system? What am I trying to solve for? And there's many ways in which I can position the question. And I hear it's uncertain. I can see I'm living in it. I'm in the moment. I experience all of this. So in my mind, it's a deep call. It came as a time of deep call for reflection and self-introspection. There's a video by Simon Sinek. It's a very popular video. And right at the end of the video, he talks about, I'm just going to use the specific words he says, you know, we need to get to a space where we allow people to show up for themselves and not for anybody else. And the more we show up for other people and we carry other people, we deplete and we do not serve, you know, the purpose that we need to be serving. So it's really a deep call of self-reflection. It's been a space of saying, oh, it's okay for things to pass. It's okay for other people to make more money. It's okay for other people to buy Mercedes and Lamborghinis. It's okay for people to have answers. I'm not going to force myself to have an answer. I'm not going to force or push myself, you know, to be in that state of knowing. But if it's just a space where I'm quiet, I'm listening to myself, I'm listening to my body, I'm observing my thoughts, I'm observing what's sitting, you know, in my mental model. What are some of the things I haven't dealt with? Where do I find myself in all this change, and what I've prioritized for myself as an individual going into my future? And it's really challenged me in terms of saying, what are some of the decisions that have got me to where I am? And are they going to sustain me going into the future? And how do I start thinking differently about that? Because over and above all of this, I think the harshest reality that has hit us all is death is more real now. You know, every second call, every post, someone has passed on. And the most intriguing thing is, it's not someone at a far distance. It is someone that you either spoke to last week, or someone you grew up with, or someone in your family. And so it's, you know, it starts pulling one in a position of saying, what is my value contribution to myself, to other people? What are some of the decisions that I'm making that are beyond the material, you know? And I'm by no means saying that the material is less significant, but where do I find myself in that space? And it's not a reflection of trying to come up with answers, but being more sensitive to your inner world and your outer world, just to enable and equip you to be able to respond. Because I think if it wasn't this crisis, it would be something else. And I believe when we pass through this, we're going to go through another phase. I think phases find us, but phases can't keep, you know, we can't keep getting lost in phases. It's how do we gear ourselves up to be able to respond? I like the words Johann uses. Are we reacting or are we responding? So, you know, in some of the pertinent questions you're raising, I'm a mom, I'm a career, I'm a CEO, you know, you're a daughter on top of that, you're a citizen on top of that, you're a friend, you're an aunt, you're so many things. And so do you wear one hat and show up as a person in these situations? Or do you know, every time you have to choose which hat I'm wearing? And is that exhausting, or is it something that you are able to sustain? And it's when situations are changing, what is it about me that remains anchored and that remains so authentic that no matter the trying times or the changing times, the one thing that never changes is myself. But the difference is I'm growing through the process. And so that has been my reflection and certainly my response.
Thank you, Mapule. So it's lovely that you are actually prioritizing self, in that you're realizing that if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, you're going to be depleted and of no use to anybody. So often we prioritize anyone and everyone before ourselves, as opposed to saying, what do I need? And what's also nice in what you're saying is that we're differentiating between what you need as opposed to what you think society thinks you need.
Yes.
And like
That's
society
so
thinks
true.
you need an extra 7 zeros on your income.
Yes.
As opposed to, no, today I just got out of bed and I just breathed. And that was enough.
100%.
Okay. And I think we're also coming to terms with it's okay not to know. And it's okay not to be okay today. Today, I'm not okay. And it's okay not to be okay. Yeah. And that I think what we've also seen as well, I've worked with a lot of people where they're processing the emotion of it and like, gee, we fell apart last week and now we're fine. And then they're surprised when they're not fine again. And then they're thinking, but like, what happened to me? Like, but it's the roller coaster, the ups and the downs and the, yes. Yeah. So that, thanks awesome for sharing that. I do see your questions, Linda, but let's go over to Pedro.
Isn't it interesting that we have to be reminded that we're going to die? I mean, why do we have to be reminded about something that's so obvious? We all know it at some level, and yet we forget it all the time. And I think the idea of living knowing that we're going to die is actually very important and positive. So as I said earlier, my background is one of instability, of poverty, of uncertainty, of murder. My mother's a Holocaust survivor. And hunger in the case of my father and my mother when she was very, very young. And then brought up as a middle-class boy once my parents managed to get out of the pit of poverty later on in life. And so instabilities, I mean, I'm from Chile, but I'm not really from Chile. I'm from nowhere. I've been moved around the world. I have 4 passports. 4? Yes, 4, since the last time I counted. And so the issue is that's the norm. We forget that the period post-war period, globally speaking, leave apartheid aside, but globally speaking, was the most peaceful, uneventful period in human history. Plagues have been with us since the beginning of time. The Spanish flu, one of the worst affected countries at the beginning of the 20th century, was South Africa. Lots and lots of people died in that period. Plagues have been with us all along. So in a way, this is what I take from this is a reminder that we are vulnerable. We're vulnerable and we're mortal. And I think that's something that we need to be reminded of all the time, because I think, and I think particularly, sorry to put it this way, people who are in the corporate world, I do leadership ethics stuff with kids who are potential corporates, and the levels of arrogance that I've encountered are astonishing. And if I'm thinking about improving the moral fabric of this country and of, as many as I can, as many people as I can reach out to, I need to, first and foremost, I think we need to get off our high horses. And I think this is a reminder of the fact that we're not the super godlike creatures inhabiting, we're little fleas inhabiting a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. That's us, that's the human condition. And all the richness and beauty that we can bring to the world is a function of that. So I think what we have here is an opportunity to rethink. One of the things that I think is a feature of the crises that have affected us, economic crises that we've had repeatedly, global economic, is hubris, enormous amount of hubris. I mean, the levels of arrogance displayed by the Enron executives, by the subprime lending machines, you name it, by the pillagers in South Africa. This is something that, yeah, we need to be. This is reminding us of that, and I think that's a good thing. And one thing that's helped me a lot is I have to teach kids who come from poor backgrounds, and they've been sent home, and they're living in really difficult situations, and they don't have access to the internet, and they don't have laptops, and to kind of it's pushing me to think about where my students are and how I can best serve them. And that's a cool thing. And I'm learning about fancy electronic stuff that can help me in the future to make to be a more effective teacher on top of everything. So there's reason for it's a recalibration. It's a time for recalibration. That's one way of thinking about it.
And do you feel, though, in order to recalibrate, that we've had to stop long enough to recalibrate?
Well, it has to hit you properly. We forget so easily. Again, we forget that we're mortal. We forget all sorts of things. I mean, we have our memory is like it's a sieve. How do you say it in English? It's this thing that just vanishes in a weird way, in weird ways that science is only starting to explain. And so we don't. So this is reminding us, and it's hitting us hard, and people are around us are getting sick, and some are dying, and we need to think. Hopefully, the fact that it's taking this time will kind of jiggle us a little bit to kind of change our habits. Because we behave like we're immortals. I mean, we produce enormous amounts of garbage. The Earth, we think we're just immortal and that we'll be able to solve all the problems. That the ecosystem is going to, now that we know about ecosystems, things going to global climate change, these things, and we just continue in this sort of arrogant mode of thinking that we're immortal. There's so much immortality fantasy, I think, in the behavior of humans, and I find that really, and I think we shouldn't be like that, especially people, and I think especially the business world, that I think where immortality fantasies reign extremely, are very, very strong.
One aspect where I agree with Pedro, and I saw the other ones, like I understand there's a concern to just deliver the same quality service, and one's thinking in certain ways, but there's being so problem and doing focused, we're often not taking this opportunity of this break to recalibrate. And I think it is important to acknowledge that vulnerability, and also that we need a healthy system, and we need a healthy support structure, and we need a healthy government, and we need a healthy conversation where we can share meaning, and not only share meaning, but like share perspectives, and we know how difficult it is in South Africa. And so you could only hope we could also use that as an opportunity to really get in touch with one another, and so it's not just a kind of fake story of solidarity, that we can just print in the newspapers, but there's actually little pockets of networks forming to help each other through a tough time. That Pedro also said, like these, when you go through a road of trials like this, that like you need to kind of build a support structure. But more than that, you need to be able to think, what is the kind of thinking that is causing a lot of the problems, and just making stress about like having to deliver the same. I understand that we have kids at home, likewise myself, and all these things. I have been as vulnerable as including even clients into the discussion. Clients have come back to me, same way, can't pay. We've delayed some kind of payments, but we've been having the strangest conversations. Like I saw somebody noticed also kids coming in the background. That is also the norm here. I've also got 2 kids. It's great, and people has been so open to that, and that is part of the boundaries of maybe the arrogance also that Pedro is talking about, that is kind of breaking this kind of facade that we're trying to put on. That some of it needs to chip away, so that we can get like genuine conversations, like Mapule, like I know she's saying, often this authenticity that's coming through, like that's good stuff.
Yeah, so very much a time of looking for authentic, of being vulnerable, where Prudence is speaking about how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic, but without necessarily being sympathetic. How do we still get results without compromising? And also, how do we motivate the team that's traveling to the office when Prudence is safely sitting at home?
Yeah, I'm just saying some of those conversations needs to be had also, you know, so you need to kind of have those tough conversations. So why is the one thing happening? So it's not just, I need to motivate others. I mean, as the leader, let's say you're not the leader and you're not just to motivate others to work, is to kind of bring them into the conversation. So it's not just, you know, how do I motivate you? How do I get you to do what you need to do so that we can keep this wheel turning? You know, like there's South Africa, we've got quite a few issues and it's going to get exposed. The inequality and so forth, some ugly things. And it's not just South Africa, luckily, but the whole world's dealing with it. And these things are getting exposed and it's an action opportunity. So as we're going to see some ugly things pop up, there is going to be opportunity for compassion and for helping each other out. I'm optimistic in that way that we can kind of show our shared humanity can come to the fore there. That is actually often hiding when we're in privileged positions. And we've been living with a lot of privilege and we've been not helping each other. And you can only really hope that situations like these can make privilege known to those who have it. And but then there still needs to be a conversation to be had, and not just throwing rocks or not just blaming and so forth. So yeah, but you're not going to get around the tough conversations, I think, now, like to kind of really like just making sure that you're not just pushing people to get the quality service, to get the quality product, whatever. The quality could mean a lot of things, not just quantity. So it could mean quality can come out in other ways.
Yeah, I can I just add to what Johann is saying? I completely agree with that, Johann. I think just to answer your question, Prudence, you know, I appreciate the fact that you know, the work needs to be delivered. But I do think that the conditions in which the employees are working on are not the same. And so I almost feel like it would be unfair to expect the same level of performance when the conditions have changed completely. Some of these employees are dealing with family members that they've lost. Some of them have survived infection themselves, have recovered. You know, some of them are dealing with people on ventilators in hospitals. So the conditions are not the same, and I think it's just a little bit unfair to put that much pressure on a person where they performed at a certain peak when things were okay. And I'm saying okay because things are never really okay. But now to expect them to kind of perform at the same level would be putting additional pressure on them. So I think exactly what Johann is saying, just to have those conversations, to say, as a leader, how do I then help you? How do you want me to show up for you? How do I make your trip to the office easier while I'm sitting at home with my heater and my hot coffee and, you know, my comfort? How do I then assist you? How do I then help you to kind of cope under the circumstances? So it is about engaging your employees in this dialogue, saying to them, look, the situation is not the same. Everything has completely changed. Everything that we knew has changed. So how do I then, as your leader, as your manager, come in the picture, and how do I help you? And it's really just engaging your employees in that discussion, in that conversation.
One of the most fascinating things that I encountered in this time is I got a call one Sunday from a line manager who asked me to check employee records for one of his direct reports and asked me to check for next of kin details. And when I opened the screen, there was actually no details. The only number that was there was the employee's number. So when he asked me to check, I didn't find out why. I then got onto a call and I said to him, okay, firstly, to answer you, there's no next of kin details, but why do you need this information? He says to me, this employee has been missing for 3, I think it was 4 days at that time. They cannot get hold of him. No one knows, nobody in the team knows where this person lives. And we were so stressed because we had absolutely no way of tracking where the employee was or who could connect us to the employee. 2 days later, this person emerged, and this person's response to me was, Mapule, I suffer from depression. When depression hit me, I overdosed my pills and I passed out. And so every time he woke up, he kept overdosing to pass out, woke up to keep overdosing. The lesson I learned there was, it was fascinating to me how this person has been in the same team for so many years and nobody knew. Nobody knew that he was living alone. Nobody knew that he had a very thin support system. Nobody knew that he was on chronic medication and he had a mental condition that needed attention. And yet he was a star performer. You know, you could never fault him on performance. He won awards every single time and he was doing phenomenally well. And, you know, it started to force managers, well, the leaders, and I'm talking about one group, but I started to see the need to engage with people on a deeper level than the superficial level of contracting for goals, SLA, turnaround times, tell me your deliverables, and engaging in a way that allows you to know the person truly and be able to, you know, to give the support that the person requires. Because the conversation was no longer about, are you a poor performer? How are we going to get you on a poor performance process? And how are we going to help you lift performance? The conversation, you know, almost overstepped those boundaries, and it was about, how can we help you? Before, how can we help you? Okay, can tell us a little bit more about yourself, you know? Who is, I'll use just a phantom name, who is Tabiso? Who are you? Can I at least know where you live? And so oftentimes those things were deemed as spooky. You know, you don't tell your manager where you live. You know, you don't show people the car you drive. But, you know, when you're missing for 6 days, we don't know where to find you. And so the deep sense of care starts to transcend, you know, this contract of, it's about business, it's clinical, we have a 9-to-5 relationship. What happens to you after 5 is none of my business. And it's sort of pushed us out of that now, because we're starting to realize that we actually, in one way or another, we are accountable and responsible for each other, you know, and we just need to know that people are okay. And the call was not for bring me your stats, show me if you're performing, but it was, are you alive? Are you okay? How can we be of service to you? How can we support you in this time? But obviously in a way that doesn't make the person feel annihilated or feel like there's something wrong with them, you know, because there's a reason why he felt he didn't need to share the information with the team, and we don't know why. But, you know, the more we start connecting with this information, some of us are not even ready to deal with the stuff we find out about the people around us, because our reaction can also either push them away, you know, or we can draw them close. And so there's this sensitivity that we've got to manage around. So our conversations are progressing just beyond performance. Our conversations are progressing just beyond throwing, you know, technologies, you know, the fast world-class technologies. They progress beyond throwing ICARES numbers over the line to say, please phone ICARES, get a counselor. They've progressed beyond, what do you need? Do we need to send IT to set up a cable in your house? But they've actually getting to a level of saying, tell me about you. I want to talk to you as a person, and I want to connect with you at a deeper level. It's an uncomfortable space, because it comes at a time when we were not ready for it, and we never thought we'd get to this level, and we're not trained for it, we're not equipped for it. And there's actually no time for us to put leaders in a room and say, okay, let's train you, this is how you manage it. But it comes at a time where you're in the moment, but you need to understand, you know, how you're showing up for the person, and, you know, creating the space for the person to bring their vulnerability and connect with you. And I think for me, the best part is it's elevating the relationships and creating a more connectedness, because for the first time, our facades are dropping. You know, for the first time, it's not about which BMW did you buy, but it's if you get on a call and your baby wants to sit on your lap and they want to wave on a Zoom call, you know, I've got to be able to greet the child and address the child on the call, so that they understand that actually my mom and dad are working for human beings. It's about saying to people, not how's your son, but actually knowing your colleague or your employee's children by name, you know, and taking the time at the start of a call to say, how are you today? Are you well? I met the most phenomenal manager who he leads quite a small team. And when I spoke to him and I said, you know, what are you doing for employee engagement in this time? How are you connecting with your teams? He says, I know my team and I've clustered them. I have my ladies that are my big and baggy ladies. I phone them every morning and I'm like, did you take your walk? Are you drinking enough water? Did you exercise? And then I phone the ones with the kids. How are the kids? Did they get onto the Zoom calls or school calls? How are they with homework? And he has a personal touch with everyone in the team, and he's able to personalize his connection for each person. And for me, that made him such a world-class leader. His phone calls are never about where are you with performance, but his phone calls about, I want to connect with you as a person. And then the performance comes afterwards.
You can see how corporate has I'm unmuted now. You can see how corporate has totally changed in that we are caring at a deeper level. We actually not even deeper level, we're caring now. Okay. And different people are going deeper in layers and more across of, you know, not just, oh yeah, you've got kids. I think he's got kids, as opposed to knowing who the kids are, having met the kids, you know, being interested in, oh, we're all going to solve this maths problem together. How, you know, we're collectively going to do it. You know? So it's really how we can be more human at work. Yes, absolutely. As Pedro said, in an aeroplane that's falling from the sky, we're all equal. It's good to see that, and I hope more that that arrogance in people of that we are immortal, we are just better than ever, and that we can just do whatever we like to do. The universe is finally going in that we're understanding that, no, we are very mortal. And I even went to a Zoom funeral this last week. So it's very much about how things are changing. So what other practical ways are you finding without us? Let's look at, like, from a children point of view, where we had work, we used to work at home and now we sleep at work. What are you allowing, or yes, we sleep at work now. What are you allowing? What are the, your government schools have now got 4 weeks, unless you are a grade 12 or a grade 7, 4 weeks of having children at home. I know what it's like having a Jack Russell, where I've had to WhatsApp the family to say, come fetch Cheeky because he's crying. Okay. What's it like having a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or twins or 4 kids running around? How's everyone coping with that?
I love it. I have 2 kids, 2 little 11 and 13-year-old. And it's great. They've been with us for months, and I really like the fusion of my private life and my work life. It seems more meaningful. Most of the time before the COVID, it was a struggle to kind of juggle, because I'm a bit of a workaholic and an idiot as a consequence. I was neglecting my family, and it was always a struggle. And often I found myself, how can I put it, feeling that I was wasting time by being with those I love. And that's changed quite importantly in my life. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's actually a really good thing. And hopefully that can, you know, continue as not just me. I mean, I'm trying to kind of use an example to generalize how that can continue as something that we can all kind of embody much more consistently and much more consciously. That's at the end of the day, it's life. We're living. It's not work. It's one dimension of life and then another one, and we need to cater for those, and we need to cater. All people need to be allowed to cater for that. Yeah.
So, Pauline, if I could.
Yes, Vanessa.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add on to what Pedro was saying. That, you know, I don't have children myself, but I have had clients in my coaching room mentioned certain things about children. And I think one of the things I had to ask myself is, what is the fear of connecting? Why are we so afraid as parents to connect to our kids? What is, the fear that's kind of driving us from getting to know them better? And one of my clients mentioned that, one of her fears was that she could find out that her kid is actually the bully at school. And obviously that would reflect on her as a parent. And it just made me wonder, I just wondered as people, and also to what Mapule said earlier about managers now really getting to know the employees. As people, what is that barrier, or what is that fear that prevents us from really connecting with people? What are we so afraid of discovering about people? That kind of makes us afraid to connect. And I think once we understand what that fear is, if it's, I'm going to discover more about myself and I don't want to, and often people do that, people avoid situations where they will be confronted with elements of themselves and they refuse to engage. Or is it just, I might fear that I might fall in love and lose you. Children grow, children change their opinions about their parents, and so what is it that, what is that fear rather? What keeps us from really wanting to connect? And I think it says a lot. Our fear of connecting says a lot about the things that we're afraid of discovering, the things that we're afraid of unpacking. What if my child is that bully at school? What if he is? And what do I do about it? Does that reflect on me as a parent? Not necessarily, so there's just so many things that I think as people we're unwilling to explore, and therefore we're stuck in this way of life. We're stuck in this, meaningless way of living. When instead, once you start engaging, once we start discovering people, we start to discover ourselves as well. So yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Pedro was saying about having his kids around.
That's great. Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, so it is fascinating to have children around and to juggle. Obviously, it is making people a lot of stress, but it is also about us being real and not separating. Oh, now I go to work, now I come home. And I like what you've said, Linda, in that you're bringing out a softer side of you, in that there's a deeper level of empathy. There's more care. There's more concern about how you're managing, how you're coping, what are you doing, as opposed to, oh, I don't care, just come to work. What I'm also seeing as well is like I'm at home with my daughter who's 23 and also my husband who's an accountant, and I now get to see how he works. I get to overhear meetings. I've been through every line of accounting, listening to what's happening in the ground costs of this and what's happened with it. And you realize, oh, your spouse knows what he's doing. Wow, okay. So it's also a different way of seeing, normally your spouse would go off to work every day and you don't know what they do. So also different sides.
From an entrepreneurial side, yeah, sorry. From an entrepreneurial side, it's encouraging to see. I don't know if the audience, the rest of them feel the same way. Clearly, the panel has steered it towards a kind of social gesture, which is good. Entrepreneurs have been very good, though, in this vulnerability and openness that is kind of uncertainty or moments of crisis. It's exactly the same moment where opportunities arise. So you can be sure that a lot of entrepreneurial mindsets would just kind of see opportunities everywhere. What I think is differently, though, this time, and it's definitely been my sense of feeling, is that we've seen less, or I've seen it luckily, less of this entrepreneurial, opportunistic mindset for themselves, trying to exploit this vulnerability and seeing how can it play out. But there's a similar thing at work. So, like you've got things that is going to be possible that hasn't been possible before. So educational reform is all of a sudden possible. There's certain things that's going to be possible in this more fluctuating space that hasn't. We just want to make sure that whatever is being generated as a response there is worthwhile. It's just important that you kind of see that that be it a more family orientated or less working hours in a day, or less schooling hours, or all of these actually have entrepreneurial business opportunities or functions that can play out. So it's just a reminder that it can't just be business as usual. It's not just trying to set the new normal or whatever. Like with the same kind of flux, one need to be sensitive to kind of see what is actually now needed, and take it from there. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yes. Any comments from anybody else in the audience? The mortal entrepreneur. Yes. Pedro is making sure that we get mortal today.
Yes.
Yes.
Pedro would be happy to know, like, I think one of the most downloaded articles in the Business Journal has been in 2019, The Moral Entrepreneur. So there is an upswing in social entrepreneurship and moral entrepreneurship. He must be doing something right in his cosmos, in his world, like to get people a bit on that side.
Okay, so Pedro has also said that my children are learning the importance of working together. In that it's definitely about, I lost the goodie now. Yeah, so tell us more about how they're learning how to work together.
Well, they understand that we're busy, my wife and I, and we communicate a lot so they know that we express our anxieties, and they respond to that, and that invites them to think about us and to be part of a community of work. Like, it's a bit like a small business, isn't it? We're working together for a common goal. So it's a good opportunity for them, and they have to adapt to the fact that they can't see their friends. My son, in particular, my daughter is kind of more independent, I think, in a way. My son is a kind of high-performing kind of kid, and so he's always competing with other kids and wanting to rank himself in relationship to other kids, and he's always on top, which worries me. And now he doesn't have that sort of competitive unity, so he's having to rethink, and that's also a good thing. And he's also recognizing that the world is an unstable place, and it throws stuff on you that you need to learn to kind of cope with. So it's an interesting time for them, I think. I don't. This thing of, what Venessa said about fear is interesting to me, because I guess we like to think of ourselves as perfect, and I like to think that I'm more perfect by thinking of myself as imperfect. So, and I think that having that attitude puts me in a position of being more open to recognizing my own flaws and learning. There's no fear. Maybe I'm a jerk, and that's okay. Now I know why I'm a jerk, and I can move on. I can learn from that. That's a surprise. Wow, I'm a jerk. Epiphany. Now I can change. I know I'm a jerk, and I don't like being a jerk, so I change. So so you get rid of that sort of fear. Is behind that fear is a kind of arrogance. Just wanted to add that I think we should work.
It's also in terms of the fear, it's also about an unwillingness to step out of what you know into the unknown. And that's what holds a lot of people back. And before you just stayed in the comfort zone, but the comfort zone's gone now. So now we have no option but to face the fear. And some, I think, are embracing that fear way better than other people are. Brendan, you asked about skills, and are you finding out different skills from the panelists, from Linda, who has shared? Are you happy with the skills that have come through?
Yes, and commenting about the nice Handiwork.
Yes.
Just for Corona, not really.
Okay, so Johann has got a real wall, that's that. Whereas Pedro has, if you guys look at your stop video down the bottom, see he has a different skill. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you've got stop video, and there you will have a little arrow. And when you click the arrow, it says choose virtual background.
And I added my own. I chose from the internet. It's a painting by Rousseau, a very great early 20th century artist.
Okay. All right, so what other skills do you think we need?
I think the topic of skills is very, very interesting because, you know, in my experience, we one-dimensional in our view of skills. We're always thinking of the next best skills and the most progressive skills, and we forget the skills that are holding us, you know, today. And I don't know if it's a question of skills or it's a question of relevance, or and perhaps they're synonymous with each other. But I think there's a world where technology is developing, and you'll find that a lot more technology type skills are becoming more relevant and needed. However, it doesn't take away, you know, from the skills, the softer skills of managing, self-managing, managing others, being able to problem solve, you know, being able to, I don't know, again, navigating through this kind of uncertainty as well. And so oftentimes, you know, the question I usually ask people in my team is saying, okay, you know, and I'm not being ageist in any way, you know, you're 35 or 45 and you're wondering about the next skill to serve what purpose and to, you know, to solve for what problem, you know, versus saying what is important today, that I've acquired over time and where I am today that will serve me today, but keep me in going into the future, because we're in a constant state of developing and becoming better and becoming better. But if we had to look at it very coldly and clinically, where are things advancing? I think we're becoming, our digital journey has always been there. It's probably more accelerated now. And there's skills within that segment itself that are needed. But if you look at different industries, there's also different skills needed there. You still need someone who's going to at a shafter for mind to look after that kind of space. You know, you still need someone who's going to be a domestic and help clean your house or look after your kids and still pay. So it's you know, in my mind, it's a demand supply thing, but it doesn't mean that when other skills are progressing, it makes others less relevant. You know, I think it depends on where is this thing moving, but what is most magnified at the point in time and what's needed. But from an individual perspective, it's what is important for me and where is this taking me?
Thank you for that. I see Brendan is saying that there's an opportunity to connect through common need and establish new relationships. So I found a big thing with corporate leaders. They don't always know how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so often you need to teach how to be vulnerable, or to hold the space for somebody to be vulnerable and know that things aren't going to disintegrate, explode. Yeah. Would you find that, Venessa, that you're holding the space to show somebody how to be vulnerable?
Yes, yes, definitely. I think that definitely comes through in a lot of my coaching sessions, and just with some of the problems that my clients present with. I think, you know, sometimes my clients don't quite know how to package their problem, which makes me think that they perhaps haven't given themselves enough time to think about it deeply enough to know what could potentially be going on. And so I genuinely find that vulnerability is something that, you know, people run away from. I do not want to be exposed. If I'm exposed, then you'll see me for what I am. And if I'm not good enough, that's the end of my world. And I think a lot of people fear vulnerability because of that. They fear exposure. And in my line of practice, you almost have to say to them, it's okay. It's okay to allow yourself to be exposed because there's no judgment here. And it's very important to create a space in which they can feel completely out of control, but in control, if that makes sense. So they can completely be open, completely be themselves, show up as who they are, but also knowing that they're not going to be ridiculed or shamed for that. So I think, yeah, vulnerability is a huge topic, and it's a topic that I think a lot of leaders are now slowly, you know, opening up to, but I feel like we still have a long way to go because there is still a lot of fear around what will I discover about myself? What will I unpack about myself? Will I like what I see? And, you know, do I want other people to know this about me? So I think we still have a long way to go, but I do think people are slowly getting to a point where they are opening up and allowing themselves to be vulnerable in spaces.
Pauline, if I may, it's Busi Dube here.
Yes.
I'm just triggered by what Venessa is sharing, and I think I completely agree with that. And vulnerability is kind of like the latest sort of like buzzword, but an important one. And I think a lot of times people are fearful because the system does not allow them to be vulnerable. Organizations, in how they're structured, do not allow, do not cater, do not offer the humanness that a lot of managers and leaders need to show up at work. So I think the biggest challenge for us as professionals, especially in the people space, is how much can we influence our organizations to be more humane? And that literally is changing the processes, the systems, to allow people to show up as human. Because we have to be honest to ourselves. The way we measure people, the way we performance manage people, does not cater for that humanness and that vulnerability. If anything, actually, you are targeted, you're called names if you show up like that. Just a thought from my side.
Thank you. Comments from the panel on what Busi shared with us. Thank you, Busi.
Yeah, it's nice. I also picked up on the vulnerability thing. In fact, a poet that I like, David White, just did a course on vulnerability. I think the artist is often connected with the link between having to be open and exposing yourself. Anybody who's been in the arts, like it's a very vulnerable thing to be open enough and allow something to create and something valuable and precious to share that with somebody. So it's kind of interesting to notice, again, I think I was alluding also to it earlier, the link with openness and your ability then to generate from that same inner source. So it's and the same on the other way, of course, that openness is like a wound. That's where we get the vulnerability, vulnus, that the Latin means wound. So it's we are, of course, like these easily wounded, vulnerable creatures, as Pedro also pointed out, but the other way around, like that's actually also where we connect, like the idea of being open, that you could also generate and give, and it seems like that there's a link there between that vulnerability and openness to share and to connect and to engage and all those kind of things that we shouldn't underestimate.
I certainly hear what Busi is saying. Where I agree with Busi is vulnerability just seems to be a swear word, and especially to leaders that have been in the game for a long time. You know, that they've taught not to have any emotional response, and they are hardwired. You know, and even if you would like to empower them or train them or help them, you know, to be vulnerable or understand the importance of vulnerability, it just seems like an insurmountable mountain. They just don't, you know, they don't budge. But what I've learned is until some of them experience a life-changing crisis, then all of a sudden the penny drops, you know. So, and I also think we've got to allow people to go through certain life processes to be able to understand what it means, connect with it. So it also comes from an authentic place. Because the more we kind of nudge people or, you know, sort of force them to be vulnerable, it hardly comes from a real space, because people will just do it for the sake of, I've ticked the box, I've been vulnerable here. And we understand vulnerability very differently. Some people understand vulnerability as the most broken side of me. So what do you mean when you say I must be vulnerable? Must I cry? Must I break down? Must I show a weakness, you know, that I'm maybe also struggling with, you know? I think even the definition of vulnerability, you know, is understood so differently among all of us. I worked with a leader that when she was asked to be vulnerable, she started writing letters to us and she said, that's vulnerability. And she was blocked. She couldn't understand, she wouldn't go beyond that. And her letters drifted us further and further away because she preferred sitting behind a PC and type a letter instead of sitting in front of you and having a conversation with you. And it's the same leader that when you cry, you know, she struggles to open up that space to make you feel like it's okay to cry. And she kind of quickens your emotional reaction to say, listen here, there's no time for crying here. You put your big girl panties on. This is how you react. This is how you defend yourself and you move on. And so that hard wiring is kind of hard to change and shift over time. The other point that Musi made when she said that the spaces we're in don't allow us to be vulnerable, I have a different perspective. I think you'll hardly find a space that feels like it's the right space to be vulnerable, but it's a decision you need to make to say, if I want to engage in an authentic manner, and if it means I show an emotional response, how people react to that, my resilience or my ability to respond to that too, I almost need to be capacitated for that, and I think it's a rejection you'll get up front, and there's sort of, a resistance and the season you almost need to navigate through, but you almost need to hold your own space in being vulnerable. The one example I always use is I once worked with a female leader in a very male-dominated environment, and her response to things was crying. And what fascinated me so much about this individual was when the moment came for her to cry, even in the most senior executive meeting, she will cry. And when she cried, there was always a moment where they allowed her the space to cry. Then she'll wipe her tears and she'll continue to make her statement. And one day I said to her, I've really never seen this in my life, and how does it happen? She says, look, I used to be labeled, I used to be frowned upon. And she says, but I couldn't hold back who I am. I respond this way. I respond by crying, even in the middle of an argument or a conversation. If it calls for her to cry, she'll cry. But she says, I understand that I move past that when I've expressed that level of emotion. And I wouldn't classify that fully as vulnerability, but for me, she's come to a place where she's comfortable with who she is. And she doesn't allow a place to dictate her response to things, but she holds that space and she will show up for herself in a way that she believes is right for her. Whatever people's reactions are, I think over time she's learned to maneuver through all of that and find her own peace within herself. But it's certainly something that I've seen as a strength and I've admired a lot in my career.
She's vulnerable in her authenticity. Yes. And what we also got to look at that there's a very small tipping point. It only takes a few people to tip it. We don't need 99.99% of people to behave in a certain way in order for us to tip the behavior. And when you are authentic and you bring yourself and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, and I like how Mapule, you've said what is vulnerable is different things to different people. But when you bring yourself to that, you're actually giving permission to the person sitting next to you to do the same thing. Yes, Brendan says trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of Bart Feldman. The vulnerable is more present at this moment. Yeah. Okay, so do we have any comments from anybody else? Would you like us to close this panel? As you said, thank you so much for a great conversation. I unfortunately need to run. Any great take-home points? Any, Venessa, you look eager to share something.
Do I?
Yes. What's on your heart?
I think, you know, I think for me, one of the things that I think about often, and I think also is a topic that relates to, you know, navigating uncertainty, is how us as human beings need to intentionally stop running away from any form of suffering or pain, because I feel like that's what going through hardship, going through pain is what gives us the muscle to deal with difficulties. And I think we disadvantage ourselves when we don't allow ourselves to go through a process. And I think a lot of people have been saying, you know, I can't wait for lockdown to end. I can't wait for this to be over. But I'm like, but what is this? What is this teaching you? What are you learning in this process? Who are you becoming in this process? You know, don't be so quick to run to the next thing. Who are you becoming? And choose who that person is going to be, and be that person. So I think for a lot of people, and I see it with my coaching clients all the time, the ones who run away from a difficulty are the ones who have a harder time coping with a life event, a very difficult life event. So I think for me, my biggest takeaway would be, or rather my biggest, my key point would be to say that allow yourself to go through the process. Don't rush it. Don't try accelerate it so that you can go back into your comfort. No, the whole point is to be uncomfortable and to sit in the discomfort so that you know who you are, so that you understand who you're becoming. And so I would just say that to the audience, that, you know, it's important that we embrace this time for what it is. We learn and we grow and we excel. That's my 2 cents to end off with.
Thank you. All right, anything from anyone else in closing?
No, I think.
Yeah, I think
go.
Just very quick. I'm very happy that I suffered. I'm very grateful that I've suffered. That's and that I've managed to learn. I take that as an occasion to learn. And now we have an occasion to learn. It's an opportunity. And those opportunities don't come just freely. You have to suffer.
Thank you, Pedro. Johann?
Oh, yeah, I just also wanted to say thanks. It's lovely spending time with you. It's via this crisis that I got to meet Pedro and Venessa already through dialogue. So it's great to see them again. Mapule, like the wisdom coming from you. I wonder, who is this person? Like, lovely hearing you. So, Pauline, thanks for keeping this together. Yeah, a lot of gratitude, and wish everybody well. And who knows, maybe we get to hang out at another alumni event or whatever.
With free wine.
Yes. Mapule, closing to you.
Mine is, I'll try and make this very short. I've realized that our dependency on written communication has really increased because it's taken away from, you know, the physical engagement with people. And oftentimes we fall into a frenzy when we read emails without the person's voice over. And so we've got to decipher, what do they mean? What are they saying? And, you know, because we can't walk up to a person like we would before and read their body language and sort of gauge their mood, it's actually even harder connecting. And I'd like to say that we even whether it's WhatsApp or SMS or an email, take it with a pinch of salt, and always try and see that the person was coming from a positive point of view. And because I think the us being cut off from connecting physically has added to the strain, you know. And so we spend a lot of time trying to figure people out that are not even in our vicinity, which makes it so difficult. And the last piece is, you know, a lifetime of growing is a lifetime of learning is a lifetime of growing. And so I think everybody has alluded to the point. For as much as you remain curious, open to learning, open to do different things, and knowing that there's so much potential in you to become greater than where you are today, you'll be unstoppable. And navigate through the mess. Don't wait for it to be perfect. And you know what? And it's funny because there's never the perfect model of what you should be or it should be. But the fact that every morning you're still alive and you can claim your success, you know, from the previous season, you are doing well enough. And that's it from my side. And I appreciated engaging with the panel and everybody who's attended the call. And I must say, I've learned a lot today and I'm truly grateful. So I'm signing out with gratitude as well.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the panel, to an amazing audience. Thank you for interacting. And we wish you safety, health, and lots of gratitude going forward. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you
And thank
so
you
much.
to our guests.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.